Thank you. I'd like to start out with a story. 2,000 years ago, the people of Judea were in a kind of captivity. They were serving layers of hostile government from Herod nearby to Caesar far away. And at the center of their world was an empty room. The Holy of Holies in the temple at Jerusalem had once held an Ark of the Covenant and the Tree of Life, but both of those had centuries before been either lost or cast out. Into that sorry state, there was a little girl born, a child of promise, to an elderly couple named Joachim and Anna. Joachim and Anna loved their little girl, but they knew that because of their age, their time with her would be very limited. And so they made a plan that when she was 3, she would be given into the care and service of the temple in Jerusalem. And so when the day came, Joachim, her father, was concerned that Mary's heart would turn back, that she would not love her new home. And so he requested that all the maidens in the temple be given lanterns, and that they would light lanterns and lead little Mary into the temple. And so they did. And Mary was enchanted by the lights and followed them into the temple, and her heart was bound to the place. And the high priest embraced her and kissed her and set her on the altar. And he even invited her into the Holy of Holies, where she stayed throughout her childhood. And the story ends by saying that the child Mary danced upon her feet, and all the people loved her. So the Ark of the Covenant and the Tree of Life had returned to the Holy of Holies. Years later, after Mary had left the temple and been given into the care of Joseph, the priests of the temple... Did that not work? There we go, we have to click the mouse. The temple needed a new veil, woven from 4 colors of wool, representing the 4 elements of material creation: earth, air, fire, and water. And so they decided that they would cast lots, and that maidens who had been in the service of the temple would be assigned different colors to spin and to weave. And the lot to spin and weave the scarlet fell to Mary. And so it was while Mary spun the scarlet wool that the angel came to her to announce that she would weave the true veil, the mortal body of God's incarnation. So a lot of ancient images show Mary with the red wool during the Annunciation. This story gives Mary the ancient symbols that had been given to divine mothers anciently: the Tree of Life, the chariot, throne, or ark, and the weaver. To understand the significance of this story to the early Christians who passed it down to us, we have to understand some things about the temple. The temple was understood as a microcosm. It was a condensation of all of existence, of all time, and the whole landscape of human experience into one building. So its descending series of enclosures represented creation itself, emanating from the presence of God in its different stages. The different days of creation, for instance, were represented by different rooms. Eternity was represented by the Holy of Holies. With its covenant ark and its glowing tree of life, that world of fire lay beyond the veil of material creation. And so the enduring presence of the temple and of its chambers representing all of creation made the statement, the argument that the days of creation described in Genesis were not just a story about the past, but they were all ever present, ongoing, and with our active participation. So, with that in mind, to imagine Mary dancing in the Holy of Holies is to imagine the mother's work in eternity and in creation. leading all things in the dance of wisdom, inviting all the children of God to love her and join the dance, bearing the covenant of life within her as an ark, bearing Jesus as a tree bears fruit, giving life to all of us, and weaving all things together like a tapestry, setting all things in right relationship to one another.
In the Akathist hymn to Mary, composed 1,500 years ago, she is described as Queen and Mother, the fiery throne, the dwelling place of light, the lampstand, the fiery chariot of the Word, the food that replaced the manna, the tree of glorious fruit from which believers are nourished, the scent of Christ's fragrance and the unburned bush. It addresses her as the spouse of God and invites us to revere her, saying, "Let every human being take up a torch and let him dance in spirit," which powerfully invokes the story of Mary's presentation at the temple. The roots of all this imagery lie in the first temple of Jerusalem, which was the house of wisdom, the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of the Lord. The Old Testament describes wisdom as a divine woman and says that she is the tree of life. Isaiah, writing in 700 BCE, was laboring to teach a people who had rejected wisdom. They would not see with their eyes, hear with their ears, or understand with their hearts, and be healed. Because of this rejection, they lost knowledge and wisdom. But Isaiah learned that one day wisdom would be restored through the emissary of wisdom, the Messiah. Without wisdom, things cannot be brought into harmony, into unity as they ought to be. Unity was at the heart of ancient temple teaching. The Holy of Holies represented this unity, which was the origin of all creation, the dwelling place of the Mother of the Lord. The bonds of the great covenant of peace held creation together, and those bonds were sealed by the name of God. There's a scriptural insistence, as we see here, that wisdom and divine femininity are tied together. Wisdom embodies the archetypally feminine traits of compassion, relationality, receptivity, bodily knowing, intuition, and how to weave different ways of knowing together. When we seek wisdom and grow in wisdom, we are naturally led to work that is integrative and unifying. We experience the feminine realm of the divine and without a doubt connect to our Mother in heaven. When we do her work of weaving, we tie ourselves more deeply to reality and find that wisdom isn't knowing more, but knowing with more of you, knowing deeper. Through her symbol as the tree of life, our Divine Mother helps us understand that wisdom is setting things in right relationship, not just gaining knowledge or understanding, but the discernment of the patterns by which we understand things in their place, their meaning and purpose in relation to all other things, past, present, and future. In this way, wisdom gathers from far and wide. She reaches to the highest heaven and to the lowest underworld, and is the structure of meaning that weaves all things together. Wisdom is truly the tree of life. This tree, with its planes of existence, teaches us not only the ordering of the cosmos, but shows us by a tree's natural processes how wisdom is dynamic. Just as light feeds a living tree, and roots receive communications from fungal networks that pass to the crown, intelligence and light channeled to us from the divine and from our ancestors. Because the tree of life is an image of how all things are connected, even across realms. When we do work that helps us reconcile with the past, or sets the stage for the flourishing of the future, we conform our whole being more closely to the image of the tree, which is an image of our Mother. The tree of life is a diagram of how we reconcile and integrate the intelligence of body, heart, mind, and spirit through a sense and descent. It is a map of transformation. It is a map of becoming at one with the self, others, and the divine. A vision of how things come together in unity is a vision of wisdom. A vision of the tree of life is a vision of Lady Wisdom in our hearts. The Book of Wisdom, also known as the Wisdom of Solomon, is a Jewish work that was known to early Christians. It describes what true wisdom is, as received from Lady Wisdom herself. To know the structure of the world and the activity of the elements, the beginning and middle of times, the alternations of the solstices and the changes of the seasons, the cycles of the year and the constellations of the stars, the natures of animals and the tempers of wild beasts, the powers of spirits and the reasonings of men, the varieties of plants and the virtues of roots. I learned both what is secret and what is manifest, for wisdom, the fashioner of all things, taught me. Wisdom is concerned not only with what is apparent, but what is hidden, secret, subtle. Not only with the static object, but with relationships between things and transformations across time. Those hidden things, esoteric by nature, are archetypally feminine and therefore experienced as the mother's domain. To learn from wisdom, to be wise, is to surrender to the reality of the interweaving of all things in relation to one another across time and outside of time.
I'd like to play with this symbol a little bit, the symbol of weaving. Wisdom's plan for creation is like a great and infinitely complex tapestry. It's fractal, so that little parts of it tend to resemble the whole when you look at them. It's good and it's true. So it's capable of enduring forever. It's aligned with what's real. And it's worth preserving because it blesses all who participate in it. Good and true. It's beautiful. It announces its goodness and truth to our senses, and it invites us into voluntary, willing participation with it. But you can't warm yourself with a pattern. It's invisible, it's immaterial. It hasn't joined in with our part of reality, even though it is eternally real. It's not present. So to become an active part of our lives, that pattern has to have wool and thread woven into it, deliberately and carefully, bit by bit. I would argue that our ritual life is like a loom with which we can weave matter into the pattern of wisdom. And I want to be clear about what I mean by ritual. I don't just mean the formal high liturgy that's a part of the life we consider religious. Things like baptism and the Lord's Supper and temple rituals. And those certainly are ritual, but the idea that those things occupy a separate sphere or domain of life from, say, our secular life is a fairly recent innovation. And I don't think it's a great idea. I don't think it's entirely realistic. Traditional societies understood life as woven together. All of it was part of the same picture. The division between religious and secular wasn't really there. So they tended to let their high stories and their high rituals bleed down into the daily moments of their lives, so that their daily habits and their customs, moment to moment, were shaped and guided by the highest rituals, the highest stories and visions that they had. They filled their daily life with reminders of those stories, and they let those high things set the pattern for the daily things. So our ritual life includes our family meals, it includes our greetings, the way we conduct ourselves at work and at home, the way that we make art and consume art, the songs that we sing and the stories that we tell, the way that we listen to each other in our conversations, and the way that we mourn. In all of those things, we are weaving and unweaving. We're taking patterns from the unseen world, from the eternal world, and we're giving life to them in material. And so, seen in that way, to be human is unavoidably to live a sacramental life. All of life is sacramental. We don't get to opt out of the life of ritual, but we do get to choose the patterns that we weave. So will the rituals of our lives be integrating and coherent, harmonious, rooted in a vision of what is eternally good and true and beautiful? Or will they be disintegrating, incoherent, unbalanced, and rooted in self-terminating patterns that won't sustain us for a lifetime, let alone for eternity? In other words, will we weave with wisdom, or will we unravel her work? For ancient Israelites, losing wisdom meant breaking the covenant, unraveling all of creation, human society, and individual lives. It was the breaking of the covenant of peace, and breaking the everlasting covenant meant destroying the fabric of creation.
So ritual, we could say, is a reflection of our relationship with wisdom. Whether it's communal or individual, ritual that weaves the spiritual realm with the material, the eternal with the finite, will connect the mind to the heart, and the heart is where the true vision is. Connection to the true vision, to the reality that we are all bound together by God's love, reduces fear, trouble, and the grief of isolation. The aim of a meaningful ritual is to awaken and to bring into greater consciousness the deep self within, to bring us into presence with that self, with others, and the divine, and to learn to see the harmony that is woven throughout creation. How willing we are to engage life from a state of wisdom is how willing we are to let the mother in. Divine wisdom, Lady Wisdom, holds the vision of creation from her home in the Holy of Holies. This feminine knowledge is the key to apotheosis and true power, which she and her son teach is love, the true bonds of covenant.
We want all of our being, the way that we are, to be like a well-woven tapestry. We don't want sameness and flatness. We want a dynamic composition of a diversity of pieces and parts. We want them brought into the fullness of their being in a way that brings everything else into the fullness of its being. We want being itself to be beautiful. Now, we want that beautiful weaving inside of our own selves. We don't want some little immature part of us to wrench control of the whole self and turn it towards some selfish purpose. We want that weaving in our families so that we can play and work together in love, each offering our unique contributions in every crucial and challenging moment. And we want it really at every level, from the immediate and personal inside of our own minds and bodies up to the whole of creation. That's our aspiration. That weaving is created and maintained by the big and small rituals of our lives. We have to act out a way of living beautiful enough to draw that multitude inside of us and around us into voluntary participation. When things come together in truth and love in that way, they become whole, which is also to be healed, which is also to be holy. To do the mother's work is to become children of the mother. There's a story that illustrates the power of ritual to mend creation at every level of being. There was a young boy named Charles Joseph He was one of the Kwakwaka'wakw people in British Columbia. And he lived the first 5 years of his life on his ancestral land, raised by his grandparents. And at age 5, he was taken to a residential school. And immediately, and for the next 8 years that he lived there, he was subjected to horrific abuse, the most heinous abuse that a child could suffer, by the staff at the supposedly religious school. As he returned home at age 13, his grandparents could perceive the magnitude of the wounds that he'd suffered, even if they didn't know the details of the cause. Sorry. We ran through this a number of times, and I was hoping to desensitize myself to the story, but it did not work. His grandfather stopped him at the threshold of their house, and he said, Before you come inside, there's some things we need to do. So he had Charles take off the clothes that he'd worn at the residential school. And then he led Charles into the woods, into a clearing. And he said, "Sit here, Charles." And he gave him a feather, and he gave him a rattle, and he gave him a pebble. The feather was to use in prayer, so that he could call on the spirit beings to help him and give him comfort. The rattle was, it was to prepare the ground for the spirit people to come and look after him. And the pebble was to place in his mouth to suck on if he felt thirsty during the following 4 days of fasting. And then he left him there alone. After 3 full days alone, with no food or water, Charles said, "It felt like the trees were talking to me." And they said, "Who is this boy? We recognize him. He's our beloved little boy. He grew up here. And look, he's returned." Charles says, "They brought me to my childhood. They made me envision me, myself, standing there being hugged and nurtured and looked after the way I should have been. And they were speaking in our language. And when you speak in our language, it's different. It's like it means more than just the sentence itself." They told him, "Notice the smells of the forest." They told him, "Remember who his people are." They asked him to recall his native name. They talked to him about who he should be today, what he should learn and do to be comfortable with himself as he left boyhood. They told him to remember to pray for strength, for help learning what he needed to learn to grow. They brought him back into at one with himself, with his family, with his ancestral land. As his grandfather led Charles out of the clearing, Charles looked over his shoulder and he saw elders, medicine men, coming out from behind the trees. And he understood that his grandfather had invited those medicine men there to speak the truth of love to Charles through the trees. He says as he walked home, it was like he was walking on clouds. He felt like some of that pain and pressure that had been inside of him had dissipated because of the things that the elders had said. It would be decades before Charles would be able to face himself in a mirror. I mean, he didn't look in a mirror for decades. But because of that ceremony that his grandfather had given him, he was able to survive those decades without harming himself and without harming others. Charles learned his grandfather's trade to carve and to paint so that he could join in preserving and passing on the visions that had healed him. Ritual, the things that we make and paint, what we sing, how we play, how we live. Ritual is how we invite everything within us and around us to tell truth, to tell the most important and saving truths. Ritual is how all of creation can be invited into the worship of God, into the pattern of wisdom, into the song of redeeming love. That's all we have. We've got about 15, a little under 20 minutes for questions. If you guys have any questions or anything you want to chat about, we've still got time together as a group. And so we plan to leave time for us to talk together if you'd like.
Do you think the other handheld mic is working yet?
Well, we can try.
Could you share the source of the Mary story that you told? I've never heard it before.
Yeah. So that is a story that is found in a book called The Infancy Gospel of James. Infancy Gospel of James. Yeah. Or the Proto-Evangelium means the same thing, just more Latin.
So there's a well-known archetype that Joseph Campbell talks about, the hero's journey, about an individual who goes off on his own. Somewhat similar to this, maybe a little bit like to the story you ended with. But what I'm intrigued by is kind of putting structure to what we might call the woman's journey, or the wisdom journey. Because the weaving example says it's a collaborative. I mean, it doesn't make for an effective story, because the hero's journey is dramatic, and there's conflict and resolution, and we see it in all kinds of literature. But the female journey it seems this more hidden collaborative, because it's somehow done through innovation. That's what kind of jumped out at me. I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point, and there have been some scholars who have done work to sort of put together a heroine's journey and describe how different that is for those reasons, and for the reason that the feminine is not sort of the product of culture, the product of society, and it's not out in society as much as the masculine or the male life is. And it has more undulation. It's more circular and, descents in a sense, and it's not this straight linear path. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. There is a book called The Heroine's Journey that I would recommend, and I'm spacing the name of the author right now, but you can ask me after. Yeah.
Questions?
Besides the typical rituals that, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ, that we're used to participating in it, like sacraments and baptisms and rituals that we do in the temple, how have you incorporated ritual into your lives? Especially, we're not, we do some things that are like rites of passage, but I love Native culture to really dive into rites of passage. So even in your own lives or in the lives of your children, how have you tried to incorporate ritual in a meaningful way?
You're looking at me. You want me to?
Yeah.
Especially because I have boys. It's lots of boys.
Yeah. Well, I've started to see all of life as ritualistic. So guarding playtime in particular, and joining in playtime. I think play is very natural. Kids do it. They can't describe it. They just love joining in. And what they're after is like a flow state. If you've heard that there's been study done recently defining that and helping point out to people that this is a human universal, that you can get into a state of participation in an activity where your self-consciousness drops away. So you're just free to feel like you're having fun, and your sense of time is gone. And So I have been trying to guard that with my sons and to find ways that we can lapse into a flow state together, where we're not having to think about what we're doing and we're just having fun together. I think that's one of the most important rituals. We also paid a little more attention to the sacred calendar, not necessarily bound to any particular one, but trying to pay attention to the aspects of sacred time that speak to us. So I've had a dream, you know, the magic of Christmas time. You familiar? I like that a lot. I'm a big Christmas head, and I would love for spring, summer, and fall to have a similar sense of magic appropriate to them, where Christmas is the perfect midwinter festival of lights. I want that same perfection in the spring and in the summer and in the fall. So I'm trying to plan activities and things we can do as a family that will carry a little bit of that magic into our lives, I guess. So there's a couple of answers. Yeah.
It's been important for me to gather with women who I love, some of them are here, and in that sort of monthly gathering, it's been interesting to see what has unfolded, what women are desiring, what they feel comfortable finally revealing to each other, and it's just sort of a space where things can come together effortlessly and without, having to really preconceive the notion of what ritual looks like. But there's a way in which gathering together brings together all of our strengths, our challenges, and that out of that grows really naturally activities and language and ritual around what we do during that time together. So that's been like a beautiful potential blueprint, I think, for gathering maybe in other settings with larger groups of people. And I don't know, it's an experiment. Yeah.
I want to go back to the comment made about being maybe a heroine, and it reminded me of a poem that I recently read on Facebook called "Sometimes I Wonder If Mary Breasted Jesus." It's by Caitlin Shetler. Some of you may be familiar with it, but I'd love to share it with you. Sometimes I wonder if Mary breastfed Jesus, if she cried out when he bit her, or if she sobbed when he would not latch. And sometimes I wonder if this is all too vulgar to ask in a church full of men without milk stains on their shirts or coconut oil on their breasts. Preaching from pulpits off limits to the Mother of God. But then I think of feeding Jesus, birthing Jesus, the expulsion of blood and smell of sweat, the salt of a mother's tears onto the soft head of the salt of the earth, feeling lonely and tired, hungry, annoyed, overwhelmed, loving. And I think if the vulgarity of birth is not honestly preached by men who carry power but not burden, who carry privilege but not labor, who carry authority but not submission, then it should not be preached at all, because the real scandal of the birth of God lies in the cracked nipples of a 14-year-old and not in the sermons of ministers who say women are too delicate to lead. My youngest daughter is nursing her third child and is dealing with bleeding and cracked nipples right now. So it just made me think of that and how strong women are.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Kathryn, can I ask a question about the
Yeah.
next person? Linking these ritualness, what opportunity is there for women to create ritual in their bodily cycles and in their embodiment? Are there ways to connect with the mother through our natural cycles?
Yes. Yes is the short answer. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very personal. But yeah, that's definitely a way that I've connected to a cyclical way of being, right? Like understanding, while so much of modern society sort of forces us into linear paths of progression, there's something very healing about the cycle of a woman in terms of having periods of work, of production, and periods of rest and recuperation. And I think that, pre-modern times, there was more harmony between people and how they moved and related with the natural world and those cycles, because there was more, I have to say, like necessity to honor those cycles for the sake of the community.
Thank you. Other questions? We have about 8 more minutes.
I don't necessarily, I don't have a question formulated in my head as much as my search for ritual in life led me to a beautiful practice of healing that I really didn't know much about, called Reiki. And some people may be familiar with that. And I just felt called to look into this. I didn't know exactly what it was. And have done the 2 levels of Reiki. And for me, it has, filled to a certain degree a void of wanting to bless, particularly women in my surroundings, neighbors, women in the Relief Society, friends that I have. It has been one of the most spiritual experiences that I have had, giving Reiki to my Relief Society sisters, where I am learning how to channel this amazing energy that is translated as universal life force. And it is an unconditional love and light that one who has learned Reiki can channel to basically bless this person. And for me, I've had amazing spiritual experiences myself, and always, even though physically it's hard on me because of some health conditions, but spiritually I feel filled for the most part. Of course, you can have negative experiences with Reiki, depending on what person you are working on, because you do somewhat absorb some of their energy. But also, my Reiki master is an Ayurvedic practitioner, and so she keeps, track of the seasons and aspects of the moon, the new moon, the full moon, and how intentions you created may become fulfilled, and working on these things. And I just love that aspect of how my intentions do really actually matter. Same with Reiki, they really matter. That for me, there are things out in the world that have, it's a small world now. We are so fortunate to be blessed with knowledge and experience of other cultures, and the wisdom that comes from other traditions. And I just have to say, seek and go with what you feel called to, and integrate that as a part of your life and create your own. I don't have to do exactly what my Reiki master taught me. I have come up with some aspects that are of my own creation that are inspired. So I just want to say that, and certainly anything you have to feel and say. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a beautiful example. Thank you for sharing with us.
Okay, question up here in the front.
Hey guys, in a church and a culture that is having its liturgy and ritual kind of vanishing, or at least being stripped, are there any things that you would like to see in the church, or any new or unique ways to introduce liturgy, perhaps outside of the temple, in just weekly church congregations, or even just other ideas that have a little bit touched upon there?
Yeah. Is the Strengthening Church Members Committee here? Are they in the room with us? Of course, I have ideas of things that I would love. One of the aspects that makes ritual so effective, and I mean in this case intentional, on purpose ritual in religious settings, is that it invites your body into participation with the ritual. So when rituals that were formerly highly embodied become less and less so, for instance, you're no longer tumbled around in a tub, you have a little bit of water poured over your head. Or you no longer have water poured over your head, you now have water dabbed on your forehead. Or you no longer stand to bear witness, you remain seated. Or you no longer clasp hands with somebody in fellowship, you observe it done and consider yourself as having received it. There's, to me, a loss of bodily participation in ritual. And so when I see the diminishment of our liturgy as Latter-day Saints, that's one of the aspects that I mourn. As far as what we can do, I wrote an article for Wayfair, and it came out sometime in the last year, and it was about the Nephite gathering in 3 Nephi chapter 17, and wondering why did Jesus gather them into a circle, and in fact several circles concentrically arranged around him. What was he trying to do when he said to the people in the circle, "Behold your little ones"? What was he trying to teach them in the beholding? And we're reading about it, we're envisioning it, so what are we supposed to learn by the beholding? And my conclusion was that there is something cosmic about the sacrament, and that comes through in that story, because immediately after being arranged in those circles, they eat the bread and they drink the wine. There's something cosmic in the Kirtland Temple when the choir and the clergy are seated up on the stands, and then the sacrament is given from beyond the veil out through into the congregation. Now, our chapels are no longer arranged with the sacrament altar at the center. They're arranged with a podium at the center, and the sacrament altar is off to the side. It's almost like an on-purpose decosmicizing of the chapel. But there's nothing stopping each of us from reading the scriptures, from catching the vision that's available to us, what God is trying to teach the Nephites, and then bringing it into our weekly worship. So that's what I've had to do. I've had to try and catch the vision and say, not everybody is going to agree with me. If it's COVID time and I'm doing the sacrament with my family, I can walk them through the house, up the stairs to the bread and the wine. But if we're at church, we're going to sit in the pews like everybody else. So I have no hope or aspiration to reform the policies of the church, but I can do my best to catch the vision and let God transform me how he will. I don't know that I have a better answer than that.
Okay, we have 2 more minutes, so we have one question, and then I have an announcement to make before we go back.
I know that you use the tree, and I've read your book and heard your connection with nature. How often do you connect with nature? And is it like a set time you do every day? Is it, how ritualistic is your connection with nature through the divine feminine?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. I have 2 small children, so
I have
things
4
are a
boys.
bit, yeah.
So I'd like to hear your side too. I'm so grateful you're here, Bob. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate to live very close to Mill Creek Canyon, and the canyons along the Wasatch Range there. So I get there as often as I can and try to be there alone as often as I can, and there's trails in those canyons that I know by heart and that know me. But more often than not, it's being out in my backyard watching the sunset, it's going on long walks, something that I can do closer to home and be able to get back. So yeah, it's kind of a practice that feels essential for me, in that as a poet, I need to be out in the world, seeing the world, and listening to it, and stilling my mind, and stilling my conceptions of it, because they don't make me happy. I'm so much more at peace and filled with joy, and the sensation that love is woven through everything when I just listen and I'm still. So that in conjunction with writing are the two really important rituals for me in my life.
I taught my little boy to talk to the trees.
Oh, wonderful.
And so we talk to our plants.
Amazing.
Do you have anything to add?
Just that for me, the answer is weekly, alone, and with the family whenever I can get them. And my alone time has to be before everybody wakes up. So Sunday morning, I'm up at 5 and out the door as quickly as I can. So.
Thank you so much.